Welcome to my channel, detailing events throughout the decades. 1989. The Marchioness disaster. The pleasure boat Marchioness was built in 1923 by the Salter brothers of Oxford. She spent most of her life on the River Thames, but during the Second World War, she was one of the vessels that aided in the 1940s Dunkirk evacuation. The Marchioness was purchased by Tidal Cruises Limited in 1978, and then reconditioned to form an upper and lower saloon. The new upper saloon obstructed the vision from the wheelhouse. She was registered in London and was licensed to carry 165 passengers. From the early 1970s, there was an increase in the number of boats required for nighttime parties and discos, and the Marchioness became part of this. The Marchioness carried a crew of two, her captain Stephen Faldo and the mate, Andrew McGowan. On the night of the incident, she also carried two members of bar staff. Stephen Faldo and Andrew McGowan has a business partnership, Top Bar Enterprises, which provided bar staff and drinks for any party. Faldo was 29 and began working on the Thames at the age of 17, and earned his full Waterman's River license in June 1984. He began work at Tidal Cruises in 1986, and became the captain of the Marchioness in 1987. The aggregate dredger Bow Bell was launched in 1964. She was 262 feet long, and was one of 6 bow ships owned by East Coast Aggregates Limited, and was managed by South Coast Shipping Company Limited. East Coast Aggregates Limited was part of the larger RMC Group, a concrete products company. Bow Bell had a crew of 9, a master, 2 mates, 3 engineers, 2 seamen and a cook. The ship's captain, Douglas Henderson, aged 31, had joined East Coast Aggregates in November 1987. In May 1989, he became the master of the Bow Bell. Vessels from East Coast Aggregates, including the Bow Bell, had previously been involved in accidents on the Thames. At the time of the collision between Bow Bell and the Marchioness Party Boat, Bow Bell was carrying aggregate and was trimmed down at the stern. This, along with the dredging equipment, limited the forward vision from the bridge. On August 19, 1989, Henderson had visited several public houses over a period of 3.5 hours, and had drunk 6 imperial pints of lager. He returned to Bow Bell at 6 p.m. for food and a short sleep. The Marchioness had been hired for a birthday party on the night of August 19, and into the following morning. It was organized by Jonathan Fang to celebrate the 26th birthday of Antonio de Vasconcelos. Fang had hired the boat from 1 a.m. till 6 a.m., and had organized a disco, food and drink. Many of those attending the party were in their 20s, and all friends of Antonio's. The plan was for the Marchioness to go downriver from the Embankment Pier, near Charing Cross Railway Station, and head towards Tower Bridge, then back to Charing Cross to land some of the party-goers. The Marchioness would then travel to Greenwich before returning again to Charing Cross at around 5:45 a.m. The night was clear, and with good visibility. It is unclear where the two vessels actually collided. At 1:12, Bow Bell left her berth at the 9 Elms Pier near Battersea Power Station, and was reported as passing Vauxhall Bridge at 1:20 a.m. She is then reported to have gotten to Waterloo Bridge at 1:35 a.m. Bow Bell's average speed was 5.5 knots. The Marchioness was supposed to leave Embankment Pier at 1 a.m., but was delayed for some reason until 1:25 a.m. No count was made of the number of passengers on board, but it was thought to be about 130. Heading downriver, just before Blackfriars Bridge, the Marchioness passed her sister pleasure cruiser, the Hullingham, which was also hosting a party. The Marchioness's average speed was 3.2 knots. At some point after Blackfriars Bridge, the Bow Bell overtook the Hullingham and steered into the centre arch of Southwark Bridge. The Marchioness also went through the centre arch. When the Bow Bell was within 160 feet of the Marchioness, just after she had passed under the Southwark Bridge, she was hit twice by Bow Bell's bow. The first impact was 20 feet from the Marchioness's stern. The second impact was 33 feet from the stern, and caused the pleasure boat to pivot around the bow of the bow bell and turn it onto its side. The upper structure of the Marchioness was ripped off by bow bell's anchor. The lower saloon was quickly flooded and all the lights went out. The weight and momentum of the bow bell pushed the Marchioness under the water and she began to sink. Andrew McGowan had been thrown from the pleasure boat into the water. He managed to climb back on board to try to open the port side door, which led to the dance floor, allowing several people to escape. One eyewitness, Keith Fox Underwood, who viewed the incident from the south bank, reported that the bow bell collided with the pleasure boat, hitting it in its center, then mounted it, pushing it under the water like a toy boat. Within a matter of about 20 seconds, the pleasure boat had totally disappeared underneath the water. There were thought to be about 130 people on board the Marchioness. 79 of these survived, but 51 people died, including Antonio de Vasconcelos and Captain Stephen Faldo. No one aboard the bow bell was injured. Survival of those on the Marchioness depended on where they were at the time of the collision. The Hullingham was around 45 to 60 meters away at the time. George Williams, the captain of the vessel, called the Thames Division of the Metropolitan Police to report what had happened. After the collision, bow bell hit one of the piers of Cannon Street Bridge, before traveling down to Galleon's Reach, where she dropped anchor. The crew on board the bow bell did not deploy any lifebuoys, flotation devices, or lifeboats to help the survivors. The bow bell did not take part in any attempts to rescue those on board the Marchioness. Other boats who were in the area were instructed to assist in the rescue. The Hullingham was already on the scene and threw lifebuoys and buoyancy aids to those in the water. Many of those from the Marchioness were swept into driftwood collection cages, and the Hullingham went to pick them up, where they collected 28 survivors. Waterloo Police Pier was used as the landing point for all casualties. Less than half an hour after the Marchioness was hit, a major incident was declared. The police's body recovery team was deployed and the first body arrived at the police station at 6:50 a.m. The police station acted as a holding area before bodies were taken to the mortuary in Westminster. Within 24 hours of the collision, the decision was made that there would be no public inquiry into the incident, and a Marine Accident Investigation Branch inquiry would be conducted. The wreckage of the Marchioness was located and work began on raising the boat. The bodies of 24 party-goers were found still inside. The wreckage was moored against the north bank of the Thames. Henderson was arrested and given a breath test. However, police later announced that alcohol was not a cause in the collision. On August 24, the Marchioness was taken from her mooring and towed downstream to Greenwich, where she was broken up. In October 1989, the companies of the Bow Bell and the Marchioness agreed to pay £6 million in compensation to the victims' families, without either company admitting to any liability. A week later, a report compiled for Alan Green, the Director of Public Prosecutions, recommended that criminal charges should not be brought against Henderson. However, the inquest on April 23, 1990, decided that charges would be brought against Henderson. He was charged under Merchant Shipping Act 1988 for failing to have an effective lookout on his vessel. The case against him opened on April 4, 1991 at the Old Bailey. The jury, however, failed to reach a decision. A retrial took place in July 1991 but again ended in a hung jury. Civil claims for compensation were brought on behalf of the victims' families and the amounts received ranged between £3,000 and £190,000. Eileen Dall'Aglio, the mother of Francesca Dall'Aglio, reported that she had been awarded £45,000, but after the costs of having to go to the Court of Appeal to obtain damages and the cost for the memorial and funeral service, she was left with £312.14. English law provides no compensation for fatal accidents other than for funeral expenses. Louise Christine, the human rights solicitor who acted for the families of the victims, wrote that when young unmarried people die in circumstances of gross negligence as here, death comes cheap and the boat owners and their insurance companies suffer little in the way of financial penalties. In 2001, the Royal Humane Society made 19 bravery awards to people involved in rescuing the victims of the collision, many of which were passengers on board the Hullingham. 8 policemen also on duty that night were given the Metropolitan Police Commissioner's High Commendation. In September 1989, a black granite memorial stone was uncovered in the nave of the Southwark Cathedral. The stone lists the names and ages of all those who died. The bow bell was sold in 1992 and renamed Billow. 4 years later, the bow bell, now known as the Billow, was again sold. She would break in two and sink off Madeira the same year with the loss on one crew member. Forever remembering those who perished on that fateful night. May you always be remembered. Thank you for watching and learning about events throughout history. Please subscribe to my channel to view other events throughout the decades.